Welcome to another edition of the RF Video Shoot Interview Series. It is an honor and privilege to be sitting here with David Crockett. Thank you for being here today with us.
Oh, you're welcome.
Hopefully you had an easy flight in.
Wasn't bad.
Good.
Really, wasn't bad at all.
You were, in a wrestling family growing up. Let's talk about the wrestling business and what it was like for you and your first memories of what your father did for a living.
Well, as far as my parents ran restaurants, and then he had the wrestling business or entertainment business, because we did more than just wrestling. And so the only time I would get to see him was, let's say, Saturdays if I went to the restaurant with him, or if I went to Lexington or High Point, Saturday night and to the wrestling. And, as a kid, he wouldn't allow us in the dressing room or back there. He would sort of leave us. Right. For a while, but you think, oh, that's a big deal, and you're screaming and yelling at the wrestlers and Gorgeous George and the French Angel and those wrestlers, and then you fall asleep on the way back home.
How old were you around this period of time?
6.
Oh, wow. Okay. So your dad was really involved in a lot of different businesses. He promoted, from what I understand, Harlem Globetrotters, concerts, roller derby, circuses, all kinds of stuff. Boxing.
Yes. Rock, Motown, Dick Clark Caravan of Stars. He had 72 dates a year on the Harlem Globetrotters. He and Abe Saperstein, it was a handshake. Wasn't written down, just a handshake. Yeah.
What do you think his favorite business was to promote? Would it be wrestling?
It ended up being wrestling. That was always the one that made the money. And he had the philosophy, if you're in the entertainment business, you have to give everything. Because at one point he had the cast from My Fair Lady come down to Charlotte, and it was the highest gross ever in the Southeast for a show like that. And he made $180. I said, why? And he said, because we are in the entertainment business. We have to provide everything. In the summertime, he did the summer pops and theater, and none of them ever made money. Never. They always lost money.
What led your father even getting into promoting events for a living?
When he grew up in Bristol, Tennessee, Virginia, his mother passed away when he was about 6 years old, and his father was a railroad engineer. And to earn money, he would put out posters for boxing events in that area. This man, he would say, he would go out and put posters up, and nail them at that time instead of he didn't have a staple gun. And eventually, through that, he grew into, he even managed a boxer, a no-name boxer,
right?
Of course. And that got him into boxing, Joe Louis, Jack Dempsey. We had pictures of him at the Brown Derby, and that was, he also promoted the big bands, Tommy Dorsey, Glenn Miller. Then he found this thing called wrestling, as I call it, the boxing commission, and it was I should say not we, but he really wanted to live in Greensboro, North Carolina, but Charlotte and Mecklenburg County had this regulation that if you wanted to promote, you had to live in Mecklenburg County, and they had a boxing and wrestling commission. So he said, what is this wrestling thing? So I'm paused because I'm getting ready to sneeze.
Go ahead, you can sneeze.
Oh, wait a minute. Okay. That's all right. All right. So he started looking into it, and, it was an offshoot, I want to say, sort of carny wrestling, but then it really wasn't. And he said, why not? and it developed into the mainstay for us, as a family.
For you growing up around the business, do you have any defining memories for yourself, or any favorite stories from being around wrestlers as you grew up at a young age? Any favorite wrestlers that stood out?
Well, I remember I was with Dad. He picked up Bolo from the Mecklenburg Hotel. That's where all the wrestlers stayed at one time. And Bolo came out with his mask. And they were driving off. And in this very serious tone, he turned and said, "David, what you're about to see, you will never tell anyone." And Bolo, Tom Ernesto, took off his mask. And, and went, wow. And, and still.
What age were you?
Pardon?
How old were you around this period of time?
Oh, I was still maybe 13.
So that's when he kind of smartened you up to the business?
Right. But he never really smartened me up. He never said, "Hey, this is," never,
right.
Ever. Even to the point that when he said someone in the family needs to understand wrestling from the wrestler's point of view. At that time, I was the only one in the family single. I was an amateur wrestler, in high school, and I went, why not? And as Gene and Ole Anderson, who beat the hell out of me, and Johnny Heidemann, who beat the hell out of me, and just about everybody else, they went, there is a hard way and an easy way. Which one do you want to do? And they, of course, showed me the hard way first. And, it was that first, coming back and just going through the routines, drop kicking the turnbuckle and being black and blue all over. And, I need help getting out of bed.
So as a little kid, did you want to get into the business as a worker?
Not really. I was fascinated by the television. I was fascinated, about, at WBT when on Wednesday nights, as a Cub Scout group, we go as Cub Scouts and scream and yell, and I'd watch these, these big cameras moving around in the interviews, and Big Bill Ward and Dad sitting over in the corner, and then at Park Center, I got to the point that, you start out loading in a ring. Wally Dusick was the Dad's guy that, splinters in your hands and so forth, and you work into selling popcorn at some places and magazines and selling tickets and then settling up. And it was, and plus, I could not make a mistake. None of us could make a mistake, or the wrath of Dad would come down on us. And finally I asked, why? He said, I can afford for somebody else to make a mistake, but not you.
A lot of pressure.
I have to make an example out of you.
Is it true that your father didn't really want you to get into the business side?
No, he did not. Everybody else was in it. But I always wanted to be in it, sort of, from that creative point of view. The backroom stuff, I wanted to look at it through the camera lens and create that the person that's watching that show is they're a front row, and you can taste it, smell it, feel it, have that sweat all over you when Greg Valentine pulls a guy over the rope and caves his chest in. You can just hear that air just come out of his lungs.
Now, when you were being trained by Gene and Ole, were you ever discouraged? Did you ever say, this might not be for me, you want to quit the business?
I couldn't do it.
Okay.
There was not an option. No. No.
When you trained, I think your wrestling name at the time was David Finley.
Right.
What led you, I guess, to wanting to train? There's just that's pretty much
You know, somebody need to understand. You know, and hey, I bitched about the payoffs.
Right.
Yeah. He started laughing.
Right.
He said, "You're one of them." You know, and oh golly, just understanding that are you really hurt or not? You know that you know some of the crazy moves. You know, Brute Bernard. You know, he complimented me. You know, and you know, it was at High Point TV, and you know, he said, you're a classic dyer, you know,
Right.
job guy. Yes.
As far as you know, your last name, why didn't you use the Crockett name in the ring? Was it something that was talked about and he didn't want you to use the name?
It was not talked about. It was just that's what you're going to do. You know, he didn't. We didn't talk about it. It was and just
right. Okay.
It could have been Joe Smith for all I know. Yeah.
How long did you train before you actually made your in-ring debut?
I want to say it felt like a year. You know, and at that time, unlike today, that the crowd psychology is you have to take control of them, not them take control of you. You know, you look at, you know, I look at you know, the Brute Bernard and Skull Murphy and Bronco Lubitsch and Homer Odell and the Infernos and you know, they didn't set up everything. It was and the Andersons. You look at those matches, the Andersons, Rock and Roll Express, Midnight Express, Ric Flair, golly, John Valentine, Greg Valentine. You know, today it's, and if you miss a sequence, man, you're lost. Whereas you knew sort of what the end was. I said sort of because,
right.
You know, when I was announcing, you know, this isn't what was supposed to happen. You know, and I realized I said it after I said it. And
right.
It was exciting to me. You know, I didn't particularly want to announce, but there again, I was a big fan. You know, that a great match, you know, good matches, you know, knowing that some of these guys that go in, you know, are job guys, but, you know, watching, you know, Greg Valentine beat the holy hell out of somebody. You know, you're going, this guy's going to get killed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you have to start laughing about it. You know, and people get mad at you. I said, that's what's happening. I said, he chose it.
Did any of the boys ever resent you for wanting to get into the business at all, or
no?
No. Okay.
They'd be crazy too.
You made your in-ring debut 1971. I believe you worked. Was it Johnny Heidman?
Yes.
Any memories?
Yeah. I remember some of my high school friends, unbeknownst to me, came, and it's the first time I ever wrestled in front of Dad. And Johnny afterwards said, "David, you hit me so hard with your forearm. I've been hit with billy clubs by police before and have never been hit that hard." I said, "Johnny, someone could have shot me, but I wouldn't know it for a week. You know, I was numb to everything. I was scared to death."
Right. Any other names that stick out around this era that you worked? I mean, you were around all the boys: Gene Anderson, Les Thatcher,
yeah,
J.J. Dillon.
J.J. was great. You know,
this is the 70s because we'll talk about
right.
J.J. in the 80s.
Rip Hawk, Sweet Hansen. Yeah, I worked with Rip some. You know,
Charlie Fulton was there.
Right.
Sandy Scott.
Yeah, Sandy and George. I wrestled Sandy a lot. He was a great teacher. It's just the Homer Odells and Brute Bernard and those guys. They were just especially Homer. He was nuts.
I got a list of names. I mean, there's so many guys that you shared the locker room. Abe Jacobs, Sonny Fargo.
Oh yeah, now Abe, he loved to eat raw onions. Now you wrestle Abe, and he loved raw onions and garlic. So it's like, get away from me. Yeah.
George Two-Ton Harris.
George Harris, babyface. George was another one. He was nice guy. He was not one of those top guys, but he was someone that you could depend on. He was the up and down guy for Dad. Tinker Todd never wiped himself very well. It was you do him and he loved to he said, roll up, and he got that
right.
You have to let go.
I believe it was November 23rd, 1972. I think you worked the undercard in Greensboro. I believe it was at the Coliseum. The main event was the Briscoes versus Dory Funk, Sr. and Jr. It was the largest.
And Sr. did a drop kick.
Yeah.
I mean, the house came down. We all just we're in amazement.
And that was a huge atmosphere, too, because that was like one of the biggest gates for that period of time.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
You pretty much worked undercards a lot and didn't really go over often. Was that something that your father was testing you on by making you lose?
No, you have to learn to lose before you learn to win.
Okay.
You have to, the philosophy is you cannot be a main eventer unless you know how many light bulbs are in the ring lights, because you're looking up.
How would you rate yourself as a worker during this time period?
Average. I mean, I could die with the best of them. I knew that I wasn't going to win, so why not go down in flames, so to speak.
You worked a little bit with Les Thatcher as a team. Was that something that the promotion wanted as a regular team, or is that something the spot your father just filled the cards?
Was fill the cards. That's just what he wanted.
After about 15 months, you got out of the ring. Do you regret getting out of the ring so soon?
No, because I developed asthma.
Was that one of the main reasons why?
That was the main reason. I developed asthma. I'd never had it before. I was a runner and didn't pay attention, and I ended up going to the hospital and it just. I remember the first time was I had the attack I was wrestling Johnny Heidemann again in Columbia, and I had to go to the hospital. I just could not breathe.
Wow.
I just didn't know what was going on with me. I'd never had asthma. Shoot, in school, I mean, I was a sprinter, and you never thought about asthma.
Yeah.
Then,
after being able to have worked in the ring, how did that help you from an announcing standpoint?
It helped me to understand the complexity of the business and what talent had to go through, that you had carpenters, let's call them, that were good carpenters, and you could see it right off that some people were there for a paycheck, some people knew that they weren't going to make it to the main event, but they wanted to be the best carpenter there. And you appreciated that they gave you something to talk about. You wanted to push them. You had to elevate that person so the person coming in could beat them.
Right.
You had to. And if they were not qualified, I couldn't fake it. If he was a snail, he was a snail.
There was so much good talent around this era in the 70s. Gary Hart was through there,
right?
Through the territory. Ronnie Garvin,
right? Now he was another one that could cave somebody's chest in.
Yeah,
and he would just beat these poor guys up. I mean, Tony Schiavone, and that was about Tony Schiavone and I, and The Saturdays we go down to TBS and do the Saturday show, and then Roddy dressing in drag.
We'll talk all about that coming.
Oh,
Yeah.
Lord.
Those vignettes are great. Also, Abe Jacobs, Gerald Briscoe, Paul Jones.
Right, Paul. Paul was a craftsman. You know, he was always had an agenda.
Yeah. Explain what it meant to the territory in the 70s when the NWA champion, for example, Dory Funk Jr., would come into Mid-Atlantic, and how were the shows? If at all, were they promoted or presented differently because the world champ was in town?
Of course. You know, the world champion came in, and it was all, you know, in every, at that time, territory wanted, you know, you had to present it like you're going to, you know, beat the champion. But, you know, you had the committee would dictate, you know, who the champion was and when and if he would lose. And, you know, the Funks and the Briscoes, you know, I remember the night that Eddie Graham brought Jack Briscoe over to the house and introduced him to Dad about, you know, making him the champion. You know, Jack was an excellent wrestler. He did, you know, it was hard. And nothing against, you know, Jack. His camera presence. He was a great tactician, but to show evil, you know, and he was an evil guy. He was sadistic.
Right.
Oh, I mean, in the ring, but getting that across on television, you know, in some ways, you know, there again, I go back and think, putting certain things, how you light him, and so forth, and instead of a wide shot, you come in and because it's his face,
right?
Yeah, you know, and the inflection of his voice is what you have to pay attention to. It's not the announcer or anybody else around him. You know that, you know, that was a mistake in let's call it the old time. You know, it was, you know, keep the announcer in. You know, he was a human microphone stand, really.
Memories of Luther Lindsay and how the company dealt with his passing in the ring.
Oh. There again, I was selling tickets and I couldn't believe it. You know, nobody could.
Yeah.
You know, nobody could. You know, and what a nice man. You know, that it just happened. You know, I don't remember it, you know, happening before as, you know, as a kid. You know, of course, you'd see blood and things like that, but you go, is this real?
Or is this?
Yeah.
Once you left the ring, how did your responsibilities in the business change?
I got more involved in shooting the television spots, shooting matches as far as on 16 millimeter film. Jimmy was the editor, but he would show me how to edit some of the things. You know, he was extremely good at that. You know, that was his sort of area. You know, you know that, you know, at that time, Johnny Ringley was my ex-brother-in-law, was, you know, sort of the favorite person. He had the gift of gab and you know that, and Jimmy didn't. Jimmy just, you know, those interviews that we did on Wednesdays, you know, I mean, it was like a sausage factory. We crank them out on 16 millimeter. He'd cut them, send them to the stations. I would announce, you know, or the interview wrestlers, and you know, as I'd do it, I'd sort of, you know, he'd push in and let them go.
Now, when your father passed away, I believe 1972, how did that change the way Crockett Promotions was run? And how hard was it to you personally and professionally to overcome his loss?
Oh. To this day, you regret not saying things you wanted to say. That, you know, you wish that you would realize that, you know, when he'd say, "Hey, let's go out to the lake house," and well, I've got this thing to do, and you don't do it, and thinking about the business was the furthest thing from my mind. It was, you know, I remember Jackie and I in the emergency room with him. That we were sort of standing guard there, you know, and the nurses come in. He'd say, you know, "These are my two sons," and he didn't make that 72 hours, you know, and they didn't want us to go up to the ICU. He and Mom, you know, Mom said he was talking about going to Duke and the rice diet there, and you know, it happened. Now, as far as the company, Dad ran the whole company. He and Mom out of his shirt pocket. He knew everything, people, names, numbers. When he was gone, that was it.
Why was John tapped to head the company instead of yourself or your brother?
Oh, not me.
Okay,
not me.
You didn't want that responsibility?
No, it just I was last one in. I was the last one. I mean, Johnny was the first, and he had the relationship with a lot of the boys and the other promotions too. We were still doing the Globetrotters and so forth. And Jimmy was an introvert. He had somewhat of a relationship to me.
Right.
And, you know, Johnny was sort of the natural choice. There was, we lived at 1111 East Moorhead. Johnny sort of had an office off. Jimmy was in another office group next door working on the film. So he was over there constantly. Later we knew it was a mistake. Johnny wouldn't keep his dipstick, and
it's pretty common knowledge he was having an affair.
Right.
So
he was my best man in my wedding. Didn't show up.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So at that point, Jim Jr. was put in charge, and not you. Were you?
No.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. No. That's no.
Okay.
No. You can only have one boss.
Okay.
It's a dictatorship.
How important was George Scott to rebuilding the Mid-Atlantic Territory?
He was.
He was key figure.
Yeah, key figure. Yeah, definitely. He had the relationship with the wrestlers that the Super Destroyer. He had with John Valentine. He had all these guys coming in, and then Ric Flair came in as Ramblin' Rickus Rhodes.
I'm going to talk about Rick coming up in a little bit. Yep.
Yeah, boy, he was a doughboy.
How would you compare? He was heavy set when he first came in. Oh yeah, I've seen the pictures.
On the gas.
Yep. What led to you becoming a regular announcer for the company? Was that something that you just fit into perfectly?
No. Tom Miller was the announcer at WRAL TV.
Dr. Tom, right? Dr. Tom Miller. Yep.
Truckin' Tom.
Yep.
He was on WBT late night when they turn their antennas up and down the East Coast. And Tom, he showed up drunken and we go, we can't have him on here. And so I lost the flip of the coin, and so I had to announce. That's it. It was either Jimmy or I. And I lost. And then I wasn't excited about it, or I didn't, but you do it, but then too, at that sort of in that whole process, Jim Goodman, who took over the station after his grandfather's death at WRL. He said, you guys need to figure something out here. That you're taking up 3 days, my whole station, and we can make money on one-offs, a lot more money than with you. So you need to look at, well, that was my trigger. I started, everything from learning, working the camera, down the tape room, audio, switcher, Chiron machine, all that. And then eventually we bought an Evangelist truck out of Rockingham, North Carolina, gutted it. Emerson Lawson was my head engineer. He won an Emmy at the Winter Olympics in Lake Placid for hockey. And I learned how to, thumbs, fingers from cutting, splicing cable and running it. Well,
You did it all.
learned it the hard way.
How would you compare Jim Sr. to Jim Jr. as far as running the company? How would you compare them?
Oh, Dad was more outgoing.
Okay.
That Dad had that charisma, that likability. He could tear down that wall. The business that we were in was socially unacceptable to the hierarchy in Charlotte. But if they wanted something, let's say the Shriners Circus or Festival in the Park or the Empty Stocking Fund, they would come to him. But and I'd ask those crazy things. Well, Dad, why aren't you a member of Country Club? They're not going to let us in. And
Because they frowned upon the business.
Right. We were in the entertainment business.
Memories of working with some of the following announcers, and we're going to talk about some of these talents coming up too. Bob Keidel.
Oh, it's great. Still is. And wonderful. Yeah, I learned so much from Bob. He was so calm, and when I'd go off on tangents and screaming at, being a fan, he was that.
Tony Schiavone. Did you like working with Tony?
Oh yeah, Tony, the kid. We had him grow a mustache to make him look older. Because see, he was the announcer for my sister's baseball team, single A in Greensboro, and I said, we got to do something here, because of trucking time and everything, and Tony jumped at the chance, and Tony's doing
baseball again.
Baseball, but he's also doing University of Georgia.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool.
Oh, yes. Yeah, it's pretty neat. He's happy.
Big Bill Ward.
Bill, I really didn't work with Bill a lot. Bill was there when I was a kid. Screaming and yelling, throwing things at the wrestlers. It's a Big Bill Ward.
Jim Ross.
Jim and I, he was at the Mid-Atlantic Wrestling Gathering, I guess, in Charlotte last year. And it was sort of at peace. I resented for the longest time. Jimmy was a mark, with the buying Mid-South Wrestling. He didn't do his, due diligence, and all of a sudden that was our, all these bills came up, and he went, oh my word. But it is what happened. When Jim was looking out for Jim, we should have looked out for ourselves.
Right. You're talking about when the buyout happened.
Well, before the buyout, this was when we took over Mid-South Wrestling.
Right.
We inherited all their debt, which no one realized how much debt there was, and we should have done the due diligence and dictatorship, and we don't need to do that.
We'll talk about the sale coming up too as well. Yeah. What was your approach to announcing? How did you approach it?
I was a fan.
Okay, so it was really easy.
I didn't want to know anything about what was going to happen.
Wow, so you didn't know the finishes ahead of time?
Nope.
Okay.
I could guess, but I did not know. Now, when I was directing, it was the only, and even Jackie. Jackie was a great cameraman, my younger brother. One Man Gang said, talking about Jackie, he said, he had all, he said, come this way and so forth. Jackie would take the hit to get the shot. And all I had to say at that time when I was directing, Jackie, and everybody else knew something was going to happen. And, so they were on their P's and Q's, but Jackie knew what to do.
You were pretty well known for being very rambunctious and cheering on the baby faces. What brought that on as opposed to just calling the moves?
Somebody had to be a cheerleader. Yeah, I got a lot of hate mail. I mean, I forget who, when we had, who was it?
I know Dave Meltzer in the Wrestling Observer.
Meltzer hated my guts.
He said, I think you were voted like the worst wrestling announcer in 3 years in a row or something
like that. Yeah. He, well, hey, I gave him something to talk about, didn't I?
Yeah. What's the key to being a good interviewer and making sure that the star you're on screen with gets the spotlight?
I think you really need to talk to Gene Okerlund, because Gene could have a good interview with a broomstick. He knew how to draw that information out of someone that did not know how to talk. And I still, he's
one of the best.
One of the best, really is.
Early memories of Ric Flair.
Ramblin' Ricketts Rose, the Pillsbury Doughboy. They brought him in. He looked like somebody just plugged him into an air tank, and he was something. And then he just, it was in his element, and he just started to go, and the sky was the limit.
You knew right away that he had the it factor?
Well, yes. And two, everyone else did, because if you look at what we did, we put him, he was part of the Minnesota Wrecking Crew. So he was wrestling against top talent. If he made a mistake, he paid for it. He would, and he would tell you, he got whacked quite a few times. Yeah. you learn the hard way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the camera loved him. And he started just to having fun, and just, but that was Rick. I mean, and it still is Rick. It was that person that was all of a sudden pulled out of this other person went to a prep school. Rick went to a prep school, and his parents were his parents were great, but Rick was they were conservative, and Rick had, then all of a sudden it's like you just open him up to the chocolate factory and said, eat all you want.
Right. Memories of a young Roddy Piper.
Oh.
My opinion, one of the best heels in the business, best talkers in the business.
But you get Rick and Roddy, and you just go, well, forget about this minute or 30 seconds or 2 minutes. They're just going to go. And Roddy, though, I would ride down the road with him. I would be driving, and he would be writing and reading and listening to the radio commentary and just writing these things down. Just
for his promos and stuff?
Well, promos, just information, just, put them in the back of his mind. He would file them away. So when he'd start talking, something, an announcer or somebody else would say something, and here it would just trigger something. And he and Rick were the same way. They did not rehearse. It's let's do it, let's go. And you do not see very many people in television today, broadcasting, that can do that can keep the audience's attention for so long, and their knowledge base. His was just phenomenal.
Both of them had books, and they told some pretty insane stories about partying during the time period. Any crazy nights where you might have joined them at all?
I was the fly on the wall.
Right.
Rick and Roddy and all of them would, if we were going to, let's say, Norfolk, Virginia, or Baltimore, and we were on TBS in the mornings, that 6:05 that night,
Right.
they would say, "All right, we're going to be staying at the Marriott or the Omni, and the parties and this, and it was." And then Rick, for a while they rented a motorhome, and Don Kernodle was the driver, and it was a house of ill repute on wheels.
Were you ever worried that some of the crazy behavior of the boys would come out and maybe embarrass the company at all, or?
No, it was not mean. I mean,
Right.
The
boys were having fun.
Right. They were having fun. Now, they would get in fights with people in bars, and that was a guy that just
trying to protect the business and stuff.
Well, but it was they would keep on pushing. You're not so tough, or it's like, I'm eating. Let me finish, and I will sign an autograph. But then at that some point, you have to stand up for yourself.
Memories of the plane crash in '75.
Very few, because I had a horrible brain concussion. I do remember one of the engines cutting off. I know we were near Lumberton, North Carolina. To this day, I don't know why we didn't. I know they're airstrips. He could have diverted over to Florence, South Carolina. They had an airport. In my mind, I remember going over the Cape Fear and the other engines sputtering. I remember a buzzer, saw a light, and I just, I was really, as my wife said, messed up.
How high how high were you guys when it went down?
We were on approach.
Yes.
He went right into a railroad embankment. The FAA report said if he hadn't, he was coming in Wilmington there was a prison camp, and he almost hit the water tower. He pulled it up, it stalled, and right into a railroad embankment. They said there was enough fuel in one of the tanks. If he had switched it, we would have at least made the clearing of the runway, the dirt area, before the pavement, and we didn't.
How badly were you banged up mentally and physically? You had the concussion, and then
concussion. I had. They did know I shattered several teeth, but they did not know that. I had a lot of facial lacerations and a lot of stitching around my mouth and so forth, and broke my ankle. My wife told me when they went to get me out of the hospital, they tried to give me crutches, but my right arm was still dislocated, and so they couldn't do that. I found that out, and then I kept on complaining about the pain in my mouth, she said. And so when we got back to Charlotte, she called our dentist, and she said, gingerly opened me up enough to put up. And he said, no wonder, he's got 3 teeth that are shattered, and the nerves are just sort of hanging there. So hot and cold,
Yeah.
I remember crying on the approach to Charlotte. There was rain, and I could not see the runway. I was crying like a baby.
From a business standpoint, how did so many talents get hurt at once change the immediate plans? And what sort of changes were immediately made?
Honestly, I don't know.
Okay.
Because I was 6 months at least.
How was the company able to hide the fact that like baby faces and heels were traveling together on the plane and not expose the business, since it was such a big story locally at the time?
They didn't care about whether they knew.
Okay.
The reporters knew.
Right.
It was just, wrestling was hot, and these people were hurt.
Were you surprised that Rick actually returned to the ring after the plane crash?
Yes, but that's Rick. Rick would not. I could not see Rick not being around wrestling.
Yeah, it was his life.
Right.
Johnny Valentine, he never wrestled again.
No, he was in braces. He had we sent he and Bob Ruggers to Houston to a back surgery place, and they had metal rods put in their back. I asked John, I was saying, I can't remember. He said, be glad you don't. Because he said he and I were the last two taken out of the plane, and he did not realize that he was paralyzed from the waist down. He thought his legs were hooked under something. He could not get them out. But he said the fuel smell. He said, you just be glad you don't remember.
How long until you got back on another plane? And were you scared to fly again?
It was at least a good 6 months. And
you flew again?
After, I flew, and like I said, going back to Charlotte, Piedmont Airlines at the time held a plane and took us back to Charlotte. And of course, I was, as my wife said, I was drugged to the hilt. And landing cried. But then after I came out and after that 6 months, I knew that I had to learn to fly again, because our area was increasing. And my first flight was to Raleigh. It was the longest flight of my life. Even the flight attendant came by and said, "Are you all right?" And
lots of anxiety.
Jimmy, but 4 rows. He said, "This is his first flight after a plane crash, and you need a drink." I said, "I cannot move my hands to get a drink."
Wow.
I mean, it was white knuckle the whole way. Even today, I can be on a plane, and I can even go to sleep, but there's a smell, a sound, anything like that
triggers it.
I'm up. I start asking questions, and I'm usually always right. There is something that's not right, and I have to know. I will not be quiet until I know what's going on.
In the late 70s, the Mid-Atlantic Territory was on fire. It produced some of the greatest workers of all time. There was guys in there like Ricky Steamboat, John Studd, Baron von Raschke, Jimmy Snuka,
right.
Orndorff, Mass Superstar, Harley Race, Wahoo. You had Ivan, you had Murdoch. Any stories you want to share about some of these guys, like Ernie Ladd?
Ernie Ladd, love to talk to him about his football and talk about, he's taking those big hands of his and whacking the side of a football helmet, but monster. You look at Wahoo McDaniels, he had this huge bag of pills that he would, and the spray shoe polish on his head.
Yeah.
Then he and Valentine, those matches, Valentine would say the only time he was in peace was when he was in the ring and somebody just beating the hell out of him. And you look at Valentine and Wahoo, if they have one of those 90-minute matches, their chests are just all blood. And it's just from hitting each other.
Right,
I mean, think about it. No razor blade. It's just, they are whacking each other.
Bobby Duncombe, Ken Patera.
Yeah, Ken, he was, he was a weightlifter and it blew up. He tried. He was one of Vern Gagne's guys. Nice guy. You mentioned Bobby.
Yep.
Pan Am Games, right? And when we turned him heel, it was in Dorton Arena, and he went straight out the back door, and we never saw him since.
Wow. Why is that?
It scared the hell out of him. People, because he was the ultimate baby face. And then all of a sudden, we turned him right. And, the fans didn't like him. Well, you're going to be heel, you're going to be heel, right?
Memories of Andre when he came into the territory.
Oh, Andre, a beer in his hand like a baby bottle. Trips were, most of the guys was trip is determined by a 6-pack. Andre was by a case.
Yep.
Yeah. And he, in Frenchie, his place down in Ellerby, North Carolina. Andre was he nice man, really was.
While your brother was in charge of the promotion, break down the roles you and your other members of the family played behind the scenes.
I was operations. Had to do with part of the time. We wanted to do the baseball. It was my job to renovate the baseball park, get the baseball team here, have it going. My sister Frances took over. Then I went on to create our television truck and the dubbing machines. We went all the way up to ESPN, or ABC ESPN place, and brought back a truckload of 2-inch machines. They were selling for practically nothing because all our stations at that time were doing 2-inch, 3/4 inch, 1/2 inch. Did that. We had Butch Harris lures, fishing lures that I worked on. Got them in Kmart and Eckerd Drugs then. I was the Mikey. Give it to Mikey. And Jimmy, I was in charge of the property, the offices, we had Carmel Center there for a while. I remember we had a water tower. These things would go off and I'd have to go over there at 3 o'clock in the morning. Yeah.
I was going to ask you, what was like a typical week in the life at the offices like?
Well, things really didn't start, until about 10. Wrestlers doing their workouts and all that, and in the case of if it were, at that time George Scott and their booking meetings, talent would come in talking about the TVs. TVs would be you'd have Columbia on Tuesday night and Raleigh on Tuesday night, Greenville, South Carolina on Mondays. I usually end up going to Greenville on Monday. Tuesday, Columbia. And then Wednesday would be Raleigh, taping up there. And then when we did our truck, Wednesday nights were where we would tape in a high school gym somewhere. I'd have lights and then come back and we had sort of an umbilical cord on the TV truck, plug it in, have the tape machines inside, rolling next day, doing interviews until guys had to leave to Norfolk or those places, and then insert the interviews and TVs and have tapes out that night.
After George Scott had run its course as booker in the 70s, Dory Funk Jr. and Ole Anderson each had turns booking the territory. Talk about why they were hired and how did they and why didn't they work out long-term as bookers there?
Ole, Dory was an easygoing, that he was not kick him in the ass type.
Right.
That's why I think, that, you had to check his pulse if he was still alive.
What about Ole?
Ole, he had a lot of good qualities. It was,
he was already angry. Booking Georgia at the time, right?
Right, yeah.
Okay.
And he was an angry man.
Everybody says that about Ole.
Angry man.
Very bitter.
But a great talent in the ring, but an angry man. See, Ole was still wrestling in the ring, so was Dory. George Scott was not. It's a big difference.
He didn't have to put himself over.
Big difference, that's right. It's not centered around you.
Right.
Big difference then.
Talk about the process of grooming Ric Flair to become the NWA champion and getting other promoters on board with him being placed at that level. Easy process?
It was hard, of course. It was hard to get Dory Funk as champion or Jack Briscoe as champion. You have to go through, the politics of it. Rick had the physical capability. Rick had the gift of gab. He was not a pure wrestler. He could wrestle, and he could walk the talk. And he could back it up. And Rick's a likable guy, and you had top talent working with him. So when they go out and someone would ask them a question about him, and they could honestly say, yes, he's a good talent, or no. You know, we had Ricky Steamboat come in because Rick saw him and said,
I can work.
I can work with him.
Yeah.
Same thing with Arn Anderson. He saw him down at Mid-South and he said, sent a tape in? Yeah.
Talk about where the idea of building the first Starrcade came from. That's where I believe your brother and Dusty started really working together.
That's right. That was Dusty. Dusty and Jimmy, Starrcade. It was fun. It was fun. You know, I enjoyed the trying to do the lights and the sound and shooting it, and that was my time to direct. I did some announcing, but I said, you know, I didn't want to be there. I wanted to be in the truck. You know.
Initial thoughts and memories of Dusty and his creative side.
Dusty was probably one of the most creative people around. I saw Dusty, I guess year before last, before he passed away, and when we had to sell the company to Turner, I really blamed him for a lot of things that I shouldn't, and we had a long talk, and we wouldn't have been where we were as far as success without Dusty. I just wish that he and I could have talked more, because I think I could have helped him more creatively, you know, but it was sort of a closed shop.
Right.
It was he and Jimmy, you know, and it was hurry up and do it. Whereas if I had more time, I could have done a better job, I guess.
Memories of the very first Starrcade event itself, and why do you think it works so well?
Well, you know, it was Thanksgiving. Greensboro was always, that was our culmination of that was the big building, you know, in the areas of Virginia and North Carolina, South Carolina. And so you go with Jimmy and Dusty. So, you know, sort of Jimmy, you know, why not closed circuit it? We had done boxing closed circuit, you know, and it was something to, you know, Vince at that time was sort of, you know, we had a strong area that it was like, television stations were loyal to us. Fans were definitely loyal to us. I mean, we could not have done anything without those fans, you know.
Why do you think your brother trusted Dusty so much?
It's easy. I mean, Dusty's an easy guy, you know. Dusty, you know, the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes.
What did you think of Dusty as a booker, and what were his strengths and weaknesses from a creative standpoint?
His strength was his creativity. I think his weakness. I think I'd love to have seen Dusty step away from wrestling and not be in the ring.
Yeah, that was one of my next questions. A lot of people say he focused way too much on himself. Do you think that was the case?
That's always been the case for every booker that everyone. I mean, I'm not saying anything against Dusty.
Right.
It's just natural to do that.
It's often presented that Dusty spent way too much money, and that kind of helped pave the way for the end of the company. What sort of budgets did Dusty have to work with?
Budget? Was there a budget?
It's a big question.
Yep, big question, right. I guess that was one of my, I couldn't understand, you know, the Great American Bash, all right? And you had Hank Williams Jr. and all these people. And I go, why? It's wrestling. I mean, if we want to put on a country show, let's put on a country show. But I don't need David Allen Coe paying him, and he'd walk around with his six-shooter pistol whipping somebody. And you know, why share our revenue with that.
Right.
That was, and it was an extra expense that, it just cost us too much.
Did you ever voice your opinion, or did Jim ever try to reel him in, or?
It was Jimmy. I mean, Jimmy,
Right.
Jimmy and I, that was the start of our split.
You and Jimmy. I was going to say, yeah. So you did voice your concerns to Jim and kind of, and
physically too.
Fist fights?
We had those.
Wow. Now, in the 80s was a decade where the territory started to fall as WWF expanded nationally. When did you first learn Vince was going after the territories?
Well, he went after Vern and all those guys, so we knew he was coming our way.
Okay.
TBS was our, we financed the first WrestleMania. Come on.
Basically, yeah.
We did.
Yeah.
I mean, and so, and the thing with that was, Vince and Ted hated each other. So instead of having a legal battle, it was, we'll take it over. And, it was great for us, TBS.
Right.
And, it pushed us, and that was our buffer. We could promote up in the Meadowlands, which we did.
Flair Steamboat.
Yeah. And we went out to L.A., or in Chicago, just off of TBS.
What were the first moves that Crockett Promotions made to protect themselves against Vince?
Well, one thing is TBS. That was the key. Then we started looking at those Florida Championship Wrestling, which was going under Mid-South Wrestling.
You worked a little bit with Vern too,
right? We tried to create a NWA reel, but when you have
too many chefs in the kitchen.
Oh, chefs in the kitchen. They didn't. Nobody trusted anybody.
In the wrestling business, come on.
Oh yeah, no, come on.
Yeah.
Can you believe that? And even Eddie Einhorn tried to help with that. Yeah.
Talk about the importance of. Let me start over. Talk about the importance of cable TV as the business changed. Initial memories of and your relationship with TBS and Ted Turner.
Oh, Ted Turner. The first time Jimmy and Ted met each other, Jimmy said it was on the Eastern Airlines flight, and both of them were drunker than skunks. And that was before we did anything. And Jimmy, somehow and this was still before we had the contract, Jimmy was invited by Ted to be on to go to the America's Cup and sail on Tenacious, which was his boat, while he was on the America's Cup boat. And then Jim Barnett helped broker the deal.
Are you going to do a Jim Barnett impersonation? Everybody does.
My boy.
There you go.
But Jim was something else, Talleyrand. If you remember your history, he was always, he didn't matter what, he would come to the surface. Yeah.
When Black Saturday went down and WWF bought out Georgia Championship Wrestling and locked everyone out of TBS, how dangerous was that for Crockett Promotions?
When they bought out,
when WWF bought out Georgia Championship Wrestling.
Oh, was it? We felt threatened, but we knew we had to promote harder, in our television, the ones that we were producing locally in the different high school gyms and so forth. That it just spurred us on. Roddy Piper was one of the first ones to leave, but Roddy also told Vince, "I'm not going to come into this area."
I remember that. I heard that story.
And that's loyalty.
Big time.
Yes.
Why do you think Vince McMahon had a falling out with Ted Turner?
Come on.
Ego?
I mean, look at him.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing against Vince, nothing against Ted. I mean, you have these A-type personalities.
When the idea of paying Vince $1 million for the time slot came along, what was your initial feeling on the decision?
I didn't like it, but I knew it was necessary.
Good for business?
Yes, in the long run.
You've been quoted as saying that money paid for WrestleMania pretty much. Why do you think, what do you think the history of the business would have been if that deal hadn't been made?
God, you didn't really have to ask Vince on that. Where would he have gotten the money for WrestleMania?
Yeah. That was do or die pretty much.
Right. It was.
Yeah.
And golly, hindsight's 2020. There are a lot of things, Why didn't we ask Turner, say, all right, you put up half, we'll put up half of the money.
Go ahead.
Because, if you look at cable or television ratings, Ted was getting, let's say, a nickel for every house he passed. All right. Then so he had X number of channels. All right. And then if you captured the hour on cable, you got another nickel. So we had 3 hours that we owned, basically, that were number one in their time slots. So he got besides, a nickel, he got 15 cents per household that he passed that we never got any of. So, and really, they should have put up more.
Yeah.
But there again, hindsight's 2020. We weren't dealing with selling time at that time. We were just promoting wrestling.
What was the relationship between TBS and Crockett Promotions like on a weekly basis?
Before they owned us, it was good. Ted loved wrestling because it made his cable system different from anybody else. That he lumped all his sports and put wrestling in there as Saturday's Spectacular or something to cume their ratings up, so they could, baseball and so forth, they could charge more. It was good for him, and he just loved to throw wrestling at the purist of television and say, they do it, why can't you do it?
Right.
Why can't you capture the time slot?
What are some of your early memories of running head-to-head against WWF?
I enjoyed it. I mean, I always had a good feeling about it. I think the trips out to LA were iffy. The going up to
Philly,
that was, saying, okay, damn it, you come, we're going to do it to you. We don't, and we can. It showed that we could.
You guys outdrew him at the Civic
Right.
Center.
Yeah. It just showed that we could do it. And he was having a hard time with our area.
What were some of the tactics that WWF used against Crockett Promotions?
Well, it was a lot of it had to do with money, talent, to try to pull the talent away, to buy the hour. Let's say the hour that we're on, but our TV stations were very loyal to us. The production managers, station managers, and majority of them wouldn't sell.
WWF had a really hard time drawing in the southern markets at first. Why do you think the fans remained so loyal to the NWE brand for so long?
We were very fast-paced wrestling. We were not stand-up wrestling. That we were not 75% walking to the ring and walking around the ring. That it was the action in the ring, those interviews, the you could believe it.
It was the best.
Yeah. They weren't showy. We didn't have a lot of glitz and glamour. That it was crazy and fun.
Why did Crockett Promotions started buying out other territories that were obviously at the end of the run anyway? Was that a good idea looking back?
No, was not. Mid-South, I said, don't do it. He's bankrupt, so why?
Right.
You
could have let the company go out and then just take the town anyway.
Yeah. But there again, Jim's a good salesman. And he kept, he was telling Jimmy, well, Vince is getting ready to, buy him. And Vince was not.
Right.
come on. He wasn't going to do that. And that's,
What about Eddie Graham's Florida territory?
We weren't really trying to buy them out as much as help them. It was, the Mike Graham and Eddie was at that time, had already passed away, or he'd committed suicide.
Right.
And it was to help them, but they didn't, you had the factions there within that group that didn't want it, and then there again, that mistrust, I had, why would I want to go, it's, you're just trying to help them, because if you help them, you help yourself.
Why do you think, looking at the Mid-South UWF guys, when they came into the Crockett company, why do you think they were underutilized when the promotion was folded into your company? A lot of guys came in and they weren't really used to their full potential. Was that because you guys didn't want to put over the other company's talent, or just?
The Ultimate Warrior left before he even came in. Sting, I think we did a great job with that. Who else?
I think Steve Williams came in, maybe Brad and Tim Horner, but they were lower level guys. So.
Right. We had,
I think DiBiase already left, Duggan already left.
Right. Yeah, Duggan, you can only have so many characters.
Okay. What led to the Crockett Promotions touring more? What led to the company doing more tour dates?
Tour dates as far as?
Like expanding. It pretty much started to expand pretty quickly. Do you think that hurt the company? Because you guys started running the southern markets less, which pretty much allowed Vince to start coming in and beginning the route there.
That is true. We should not have forgotten who brought us to the dance, and we should have taken our time. But
we did interviews with Ric Flair and Arn Anderson, right. And both have told us that if the company had stayed loyal just running in the Eastern Seaboard, Crockett Promotions might still exist. Would you agree?
Yes.
What was the biggest mistake made, in your opinion?
The Mid-South deal. Mid-South.
What led? Go ahead.
The Mid-South deal, definitely, because until then we could justify the expenses. With the Mid-South deal, then we got this twin-engine G1, held 16 passengers, 16 wrestlers. And we ended up getting a Falcon 20, which we shouldn't have.
That was yeah.
That was a nail in the coffin, and I was.
I'm gonna start talking about some of that stuff. I want to look back a little bit during the '80s. There was a lot of big angles that took place and a lot of talent that came through the territory. Some of your memories with Tully Blanchard?
Oh, Tully, great. With Terry Allen, Magnum TA, those, and part of the Four Horsemen. I mean, there again, the interviews, with Tully and JJ and Rick and Arn, classic. You just go and stick a mic there, and
everybody shined.
Yeah, and everything is off the cuff. It's it's like tonight in Greensboro, or this coming Sunday, and here they go.
You had Barry Windham in the company,
right?
Road Warriors, Jimmy Cornette,
right?
One of the best talkers in the business.
Yes.
Lex Luger, who's here today,
right?
Mike Rotunda, Rick Steiner, Eddie Gilbert. Any memories from any of the mentioned names that Midnight Express?
Midnight Express were, I remember I was doing a dual broadcast, Starrcade, Greensboro and Atlanta, and I was in the truck in Atlanta. I was the home base, and Jimmy and Dusty were in Greensboro, and they were going crazy sometimes. And I said, "I'm not listening to you," because I was doing I said, I've got to direct right now. I'm doing both of these things, And it was fun. I used Verilites, 75 Verilites, and that was from Phil Collins, and you know, I just saw it. I said, I remember, who's the guy from Verilite? I called and he said, "You want to do what? You're with whom?" And I said, "I want to use, you know, your Verilites. So there's moving lights at that time. And, you know, I want to use, you know, the main focus of this thing and program it." And we did, and that's, you know, and Jim Cornette, that was a scaffold match, and he went down knees stiff and blew out both knees.
Yep,
stiff as a board. Boom, and just the, you know, the Midnight Express and the rock and roll. It was
magic.
Yes, it was. Really.
Memories of Michael Hayes, Jimmy Garvin.
Oh, well, you know, they were all, you know, they were two crazy guys. You know, Jimmy is a pilot.
Yep.
You know, for I guess American Airlines, maybe still.
Baby Doll. Memories of Baby Doll.
Yes. Yeah. And here's this woman that's 6 feet tall, very muscular built. That Rick. I mean, there again, it's Rick. And part of this, the Four Horsemen deal, he made her, you know, and she helped make him.
Talking about the Horsemen, what are some of your favorite memories of the rise of the Four Horsemen, and when did you realize the company was onto something with them? Oh,
it just happens, you know. It's the interviews, the electricity that they start, and the gleam in their eye. And you see, oh God, you know, here it comes, and just their talk and the action in the ring. JJ, when he gets tied up in the ropes and he starts bouncing around, and it's just classic.
What are some of your favorite angles from that time period in 87, 86? There was so much.
Oh, really? I mean, it was, you know, there were so many of them.
I could watch Raw, and I can't remember what happened 3 weeks ago. But in my memory, I was talking to Meltzer about this today. We could recite almost every TV from like the 85 to 87. I remember all the promos, all the angles.
Yeah.
You watch wrestling today, and you forget about it 3 weeks later. That's how good your company was.
And that's a shame. It's, you know, it's that my father-in-law would say, you know, about golf courses. He helped design some golf courses, and he was a member of Augusta National, and he would talk about when you play a course, there has to be memorable holes. You know, that hole, you know, can be one or two that you remember on that, and today there are not those memorable matches that you, and that's a shame, because I look at some talent, and there again, I don't watch it all the time. I can't. I get too wound up.
Memories of the big angle where Nikita Koloff hit you with the Russian sickle.
He loved that, by the way. He loved that.
I was going to ask you. The belief is that he didn't personally like you, and he stiffed you. Is that true?
Yes.
Why?
That time he hated my guts.
Why is that?
He said I was sarcastic, and I'd look at him and just getting tongue-tied, and Ivan, you know, Ivan's such a nice guy, but I'd wind him up, and he said I couldn't wait. He said I just couldn't wait. And I had no idea when it was coming.
Wow.
And to me, they asked me, what was it like? And I said, do you remember a kid and you're running through the dark and you run into a clothesline and it spins you? Well, that's what happened. Yeah. And everybody there, everybody thought I'd been killed.
Right.
Been killed. And I sold it. From the car, I mean, all the way home, and I loved it.
It was money. You got to work special guest referee for the Nikita Flair match too. So
right. At the stadium in Charlotte. Yeah.
How do you think the history of the business would have changed had Magnum not got into the car wreck?
Oh,
he would have been world champion.
He would have been the world champion.
Yeah.
He was primed. He had there again. He was another one that the camera loved him. He had that gift. He also had the athletic ability to back it up.
Talk about Starrcade '87 on pay-per-view. Whether it was worth in the end to have moved the show to Chicago and have run it on Thanksgiving afternoon instead of the night.
Nope. It should have stayed where it was. It should have. I mean,
Okay.
Cost-wise too. Nothing against, but with cost-wise, it was not worth it. The building was extremely hard to adapt.
When you guys were getting a little bit more aggressive in the war against Vince, you guys pretty much ran the very first Clash of Champions up against WrestleMania 4. Did you guys ever get any flack from the cable companies for it?
Oh, yes. Yes. Jerry Hogan at the time came down and said, cable companies called and we can't do that anymore. Even though Turner got fantastic ratings.
Oh, yeah.
No.
Now, there was a lot of finger pointing. We kind of touched on this earlier. There was a lot of finger pointing in regard to the person responsible for the death of Crockett Promotions. Who do you blame? And is it shared responsibly?
I blame myself.
Really?
I have to. I saw it. I gave up.
Why?
I shouldn't have. I was so frustrated. It was
Frustrated because of
wouldn't listen, and it didn't do any good to choke him to death. They were just
they would be Dusty and your brother.
Yeah, and snake bit. I said you've got to look at net. You got to look at net. And it just, and Jimmy had already made his deal with Turner when
How did you learn about that?
Through Jim Barnett, and that didn't help our relationship, and it was up to Jackie Francis and I, and I worked, to get them, myself deals and
right.
But then if you look at it, who came out better? Shortly after we went, Jimmy told him to take a hike. Francis, Jackie and I survived just because we could deal with
The politics. Were there any other potential buyers before?
I had some people. I was told, from our family attorney, he said, you can't do that.
Did you want to sell the company?
No. They pulled the mother card on me. I was willing to take it to Chapter 11 if need be. She came in and said, David. I said, yes, ma'am.
Did Vince ever try to buy the company at all?
No.
No, okay.
No.
What led to the final decision to let Ted buy it?
To me, it was my mother telling me this is what we need to do. And Jimmy, he sort of done his thing.
Could anything have been done beyond selling it to save it?
Yes. There were people that were willing to come to our aid and become partners with us. WBT, Jim Babb there, Governor Martin, the governor of North Carolina had called me. Jimmy wouldn't take his call. Same thing with Jim Babb. And there were investors. I had a friend down the street, Gene Johnson, with Fairpoint Communications, and we worked. He was in the cable business, buying up mom and pop phone companies and doing that, and he was helping me. But it was that's the same thing when Vince bought it from Turner.
Yeah.
I had people lined up for that, and Turner's people, would not sell it.
Bischoff also, right, had people, or was it the same people? Or
No, mine was different
Okay.
than Bischoff.
when you guys sold the company to Turner, why was the video library sold to Turner? Because at some point it wasn't really standard for the libraries back then to go with the rights to the company. Like Watts in Florida, they pretty much kept their libraries.
Turner wanted it.
Okay. Do you wish at this point in time that you would maintain ownership to the tapes? Or
I probably could have. I mean, they left a lot of them. They really, I mean, all the 16 millimeter film, I thought they took everything, but they didn't. And then they lost it.
Wow.
Really.
It's money.
Everything they took, all the 2-inch tapes. I mean, we had classic matches back when my dad was alive on 16. Then we had 3/4-inch tape. Then we had a 1/2-inch tape. They did not. They took, and then they lost it. They lost it.
How do you lose that?
Good question. They reorganized they kept everything there at the Techwood, and in remodeling and moving things, they lost it. And when Vince bought it, they gave me the third degree about where are all these tapes, and I said they took it.
Huh. What sort of deal was made to keep the Crockett family involved after the sale? You were supposed to consult, produce, and announce. So what happened?
It would not be a Turner company eventually if I was announcing. It wouldn't change. I went, okay. By which they told me that,
You would have probably, done things differently.
First. The thing is, I had Jim Dooley, a good friend of mine who was an NFL referee, was talking to me about going to work for NFL Films. I should have done that. I had a consulting agreement for 5 years. 5 years was paid for, insurance and everything, and I could have gone on and maybe I've been in football now.
When did you realize that WCW wasn't going to be the Crockett Promotions reborn?
Oh, I knew it wouldn't.
Okay. Why did WCW immediately fire Dusty?
Oh, that was Turner. Jim
Herd?
Jim Herd. Oh.
First impressions of Jim. Out of his league?
Yes. Talking about what he could, I'd just come in a truck with a briefcase and direct, but then you look at, he and
Jack Patrick?
Yes. Was it Jack? Petrie. Jack Petrie.
Right.
Yeah. They were good friends, and that's how he came about. And Petrie was gone before Jim.
Yeah, what happened there? They had a little falling out?
No, it was with the Turner people.
Okay.
It wasn't Jim and Petrie. It was, Petrie was the one that told Jimmy to stay home.
Talk about your role working in production for WCW, and what was it like watching the promotion going through so many changes and different leaders over the years?
It was hard. I mean, it was frustrating. You think that nobody really, the Turner people looked at it as a way to bump their budget up. A lot of them, they're the marketing people, and said, all right, we'll put X number of thousands of dollars in, that we're going to budget to WCW. The same thing with the syndication and all this, and they didn't do it, but it helped them, but hurt us. Then nobody really cared, till Bill Shaw, and he was the HR person, and nobody in the board wanted it, and he raised his hand and he said, "Ted, I'll take him."
Why did WCW finally get rid of Jim Herd?
Oh, Jim Herd?
Yeah.
He just
self-destructed.
Yeah. And Jim was a decent guy. It just that, he said, with the wrestlers cannot do it. We're going to give them a show they won't forget with lights and pyrotechnics and so forth. That's it. Okay. Yeah, that's when I took Abby, Spanky, Abdullah the Butcher,
Right.
electrocuted him. I had more gunpowder on around that ring and
Was that
gutters.
Halloween Havoc 90, I think, or something?
Yeah, in Chattanooga. Oh Lord, and to this day he said, "Boy, that was fantastic." Talking.
What are your memories of Kip Fry? And do you think he was a worthy replacement?
Kip was creative. It was out of his league as far as the wrestlers. Wrestlers are different animals. Come on. And he got on TV anytime, and that was Jimmy too. Anytime they get on TV, I say they're snake bit. As soon as they do it, it's a downfall. And when he did, it was his downfall. Always. Now I think he went on and after he left Turner, I think he went with a software company, Red Hat or something.
I believe so.
Yeah.
Memories of Bill Watts and his WCW run, and why do you think he didn't fix the company?
Oh, Bill Watts he wanted to show him who's boss.
Bully?
Yeah. And, first time anybody met him, we were where? Some hotel, and he was peeing in the plants. And he brought his gun.
Watts claimed that he bought the company down to affordable levels of finances. What sort of budget cuts did he really make to the production end of the company?
He didn't want any lights or stuff, which is fine.
Right.
Yeah. But you have to have the talent besides the talent, you have to have the storylines. You can have all the talent in the world, but if you don't have the storylines, and for the talent to buy into it, they have to buy into it, make them part of it. Well, they didn't. A bully is a bully, and they just sort of walk through that.
Take their payday.
Yeah, they're guaranteed pay.
Right. Did you ever try to get in charge at all?
Yes. When Bill Shaw was interviewing, I went over and talked to him, and he said, David, I can't let you do it.
Why is that?
He said, you're Crockett.
I was going to ask you, did WCW ever come back to the Crockett's for help?
And he said, I'm going to put Eric Bischoff in charge, and I want you to protect his back. He's got a lot to learn, and you need to make sure that he's all right.
Did you get along with him?
Yeah.
You and Eric got along good? Good.
Mm-hmm. I took a lot of hits for him, but that's Bill and I had lunch every week, and and Eric was, Eric said, you remember the first time it was in Corpus Christi, Texas, and he came down to do the 900 line, and I was setting things up, and he walks in and he starts asking me why. I said, stand over there and I'll get to you.
Why do you think Bischoff succeeded and then he failed?
He too snake bit. Eric, he had it, his creativity, but then he started listening to and promoting himself and only a certain number of people. But Eric was very creative. He just needed to back away. And, I thought the second time when he came in, he would, matter of fact, I was on vacation when they sort of terminated him. I went, what? I couldn't believe it.
Huh. How do you feel about when WCW finally started taking to Vince with the Monday Night War?
Oh, I loved it. And that was Eric's thing. The ratings and we always wanted to do it live because he did one live, one tape, and we worked every quarter hour. We'd go through that 15-minute mark and just cut at the right time and come back, and it just.
Describe your role in production for the Nitro and pay-per-views during that era.
I was camera placement. At first it was the buck stopped with me. Then the politics. People wanted, and I guess I was oblivious. I thought everything was fine, but then people wanted me out. I went, well, but then that too is when they started killing the budgets went through the roof, and I kept on saying, guys, you're killing the golden goose. At one point we had, I want to say, $14 million worth of talent just sitting at home. There's no reason for that.
Yeah.
And if it were Vince's, it was, they're salesmen, and you cannot give them everything, and because then there's no incentive. You have to always have an incentive.
And it's crazy because this because you're from a wrestling family, and WCW was now a business, and you had corporate people running it, not a.
And they took it for granted. You were like a basketball player or a baseball player, that you're going to go out and do your very best.
Yeah.
Wrong.
They're going to take.
There's nothing against you guys, but some of you it's true.
Before we get into some of the talent that were very critical during that period of time, I want to go back. I kind of skipped over some names. I just want to mention some wrestling names that were in the company in the, I guess, mid 90s, early 90s. Mick Foley, Cactus Jack. Early memories of Mick.
Yeah, he was character. Yeah.
Brian Pillman, you had.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the
Steve Austin, young Steve Austin.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Did you see the It Factor in him?
Yes. I did. I remember we were doing. Who was it? Was Jim Hurt still there? Because they wanted to make him Dennis the Menace, and he said, "No way in God's green earth are you going to do that." He said a few other words too.
Right.
But yeah, he already had talent. He really did.
Paul Heyman was there.
Yeah.
Your brother actually later on went into business a little bit with him. I think they did the WWN one TV taping.
Right. They screwed him bad.
What happened there?
I don't know, but they said they were going to do things, and they
Paul
didn't.
Screwed him, or
Paul screwed him.
Okay, he probably went with Todd Gordon, ECW, and the rest is history. Rick Rude, memories of Rick Rude.
Yeah,
you knew him obviously from earlier days too. When he was with Manny.
Right. Yeah,
Dustin Rhodes.
Yeah, Dustin.
Upstart.
Yeah, good wrestler. I mean, even look at him today. It's excellent wrestler.
Longevity.
Yes.
Scott Steiner.
Crazy.
Always outspoken.
Yeah. Definitely. That Terry's muscle, but that thing popped out.
You had Vader. Vader was there.
Yeah, Vader losing his helmet, tripping.
Johnny B. Bad.
Yeah, John. Oh yes.
I think you're referring to the Shockmaster. He was the one that tripped.
Well, no. Vader did too. At one time, trying to keep his helmet on.
No.
Shockmaster was, I remember Eric running out the truck. What are we going to do? I mean, we were crying. We were laughing.
Oh my God.
I mean, and I said, "You're going to make him a clown. That's what you're going to do."
And that was he was kind of related to Dusty at the time too. So
yeah, they were upset about that. But I said, "Hey, if he can't walk, he can't walk."
Right. Now, during the heyday, during the wars, a lot of talent came in from WWE, like Scott Hall, Randy Savage, Kevin Nash, Hulk Hogan. How big do you think the influence of these talents helped WCW start beating Vince?
Oh, definitely. Bill Shaw definitely credits Hogan. We were recognized nationally with Hogan. He was willing to spend the money,
and he got you guys a lot of deals too.
Right. The Scott Hall, I to this day, one a great talent at self-destruct. self-destruct. I just, his interviews, that curled hair and that toothpick and it's a shame. Really is.
What about Kevin Nash?
Kevin, same way. He was, he's the locker room lawyer, guy.
A lot of politics.
Complainer, but but good talent.
Did you see a lot of the politics? Because Eric Bischoff had a lot of guys in his ear. He had his friends, and then he had Hogan, and then he had the other clique of Kevin and Scott.
Hogan was always had his ear,
right?
Always.
Who influenced Eric the most?
Hogan.
Would you sit back and were you able to say anything because you kind of had to, or did you just watch everything play out?
Well, you're not gonna.
Yeah.
No, it's he didn't at first. Eric had his own ideas. Doing the shows down at Disney. I remember it was, David, this is what we're going to do. I went, well, okay. Then I made it work, and it was, and I thought it was a great concept. That his idea of what wanted to happen down there. It was going to be a training facility too, and guys could learn. And then you look at what happened in the Olympics, and and we did the Monday Nitro out there in front of Disney MGM.
Right.
I mean, I still have the drawings, the conceptual drawings of that.
Memories of working a little bit with Randy Savage. What was he like outside the ring?
Very nice guy. Really nice.
Bill Goldberg?
Bill, as soon as I saw him, I said, the one thing was, we can't let him talk because we have no idea of how he's going to sound. That was the scary part, because his persona was, he could walk through walls and chew nails, and but you don't know what it's going. Can you imagine him with a, maybe he's going to kill the King's English, or is it going to be too northern accent or too southern, or what? Is it too high pitched tone?
Right.
That was the scary part, and that's why for so long he did not say a single word.
You think the company dropped the ball with him?
Yes, I
by ending the streak.
Yes, I think there could have been other things, but there again, that was the politics of,
a little people got in his ear, and I guess.
Yeah.
What about Bobby Heenan and Mean Gene? You got along with those guys?
Oh yes. Yeah.
Okay. Talk about what your role as VP was of production, and what were your responsibilities back then?
Well, at first was just I was the backstop for everybody. I believe that people were there, so like me to be team people. And, I to this day, the big mistake was Keith Mitchell, Eric, and somebody had gotten in his ear, and Eric said, David, you've got to fire him. I said, why? Because I told you so. And, that wasn't right. And, I told him, I said, well, we've got to fire you. But then it didn't, because it's corporate and you have to go through, and so it didn't happen. And I know, to probably this, even today, he probably hates my guts. And Keith, I'm sorry about that, but it was, I didn't think it was right. And I, since then realized the people in the background that were, setting me up and him up.
Politics.
So, yeah, politics. I hate politics.
Roddy Piper, how did he change from the mid 80s? Now you're dealing with him in the 90s.
He was older. He still was a talker. Of course, he couldn't move as much in the ring, but as far as his interviews and everything else, it was great.
What happened the night WCW ran too long with Halloween Havoc, and it went off the air with DDP versus Goldberg in the ring? Who was responsible for that?
I guess we all were. I'm not going to point fingers.
Okay.
It ran over. There was a failure to communicate. Let's put it that way.
Was there a lot of heat on you guys, or?
There was a lot of heat on everybody.
Right.
It was, the trying to get time with the cable systems but they have to have, get ready to rerun it. And it was not pretty.
How would you compare the success of the NWO in its heyday to the Horsemen's run in their heyday? Who was more money? Who drew more money?
Well, different times.
We also had a lot of merchandising too at the NWO.
Yeah, that's what I say. Different times.
Yeah.
Both of them, I would say, would be just as successful. The only thing with the NWO, it was, I remember that we were shooting something in Chicago at what studio was it? And the black leather coats and Eric it was, some people said this is the era of Nazism, which brought back bad memories to people.
Right.
Other people, they liked it, but that changed.
What are your thoughts on the end of WCW and WWE finally owning everything? How did you feel about when the company shut down?
I knew 3 years before.
You saw it coming?
I saw it coming. Again, I kept on saying, you're killing the golden goose. You're just killing it. You're killing it. You can't continue to spend this money. You look at everything was very secretive. All right, David, go buy an ambulance for $20,000, or we're going to blow a bus up or turn it over. And they tell you at the last minute, well, you can't negotiate. And it was stupid.
What was the most ridiculous thing that you had to purchase on behalf of the company?
I guess the school bus, and blow that, and turn it over, and that was expensive. Well, you've got Sturgis, that was a good $1 million.
Right.
You have to build your own town there. I mean, you had to bring everything in. You didn't have hotels, you had motels.
Right.
Fun, as far as creativity, making it happen. But money-wise, it was. Remember Eric take me out in the middle of winter. I said, "You want to do what?"
You thought he was going to whack you, probably.
I said, "It's cold out here. Come on."
Talk about the final episode of Nitro. You made a speech to everyone before the show backstage. Talk about that speech and why you chose to speak about the end of the company that came from Crockett Promotions. What was that speech?
I just wanted to thank all those people that had been with me for so long, making Nitro the way it was, the lighting crew and the sound crew and the pyrotechnics, the 26 stagehands and people that would travel with us, and all those, and then the power companies, the uplink guys, and none of those people had contracts. Again, I went back to my dad's day, and Mike Sastrazemis with Show Logistics now, who is the #1 generator company in the United States for television.
Right.
When I met him, I gave him a handshake. I said, as long as you do a good job, you're here. When you don't, you're gone. And he said his bankers could really never understand that. But Mike, I made you a rich man, though.
What do you think of the wave of nostalgia for 1980s wrestling and the Crockett Promotions, specifically in the material being available on the WWE Network and the annual gatherings in Charlotte? Are you happy that
Yes,
to this day?
I am.
Yeah.
Very happy. I'm happy for our fans. We could not have done anything without them. And how quickly we forget.
Why do you think your brother Jim has never really attended any of the gatherings and has given really few interviews since leaving the business? Do you think that he feels the fans still blame him?
He's embarrassed. Really?
Have you guys mended fences?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Life's too short.
Exactly. I was just going to say that.
Yeah.
Especially over the wrestling business.
And the people that try to stab me in the back at Turner. After years, Will Bird, who I brought in as production manager because they said, you can't do this, by yourself the whole time, and became good friends. And all of a sudden he said, Eric, it's either David or me. And Eric said, talk to me about it. And he said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, I'll put Steve Barrett in and I won't let him fail. So that's what I did. And Will and I didn't talk for years until I said, well, I'm driving over to Nashville and I want to get together. It's, again, life's too short.
What did you think of the Jim Crockett Promotions Good Old Days documentary? Did you watch it?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Let everyone know what you and your brother are up to today and talk about the Crockett Foundation and what led to that being created.
My parents were involved with retarded citizens for quite a while, and then my niece was working with it, and somebody that had the money that we put in didn't work right, so she reworked it, and it's more working with military families and soldiers returning, and which I think is a good idea. I still think that those kids. I remember out at Special Olympics in Charlotte, they told us after the first time, he said, we need to make a time when you come, because when your wrestlers come, everything stops. And the wrestlers love going out there because they just said, thank you, Lord.
Do you watch the product today?
Very seldom.
What?
I there again, the frustration over the
scripted promos and
right,
all high spots.
the scripted matches.
There's no storytelling anymore. It's spot,
right.
spot.
Yeah, it's choreographed.
Yep.
And
nobody calls it in the ring anymore either.
yeah, I mean you lose the creativity's not there, the wrestler wise.
When you look back on your time and your family's time in the business, what do you think your legacy should be?
Golly, my legacy, I hope that people think that I gave them a good quality entertainment for the time we had it. That they enjoyed it. I know that while we had it, I would get letters saying my grandmother or grandfather died watching TV, and I know they died happy. And as long as the fans still remember it and come to these reunions, that's eventually those fans will, I just wish that maybe someday that some young people out there would study, the Ric Flairs, the Four Horsemen, and be able to adapt in some way.
Any personal regrets when it comes to the business?
I'd wish I'd been able to buy the company several times. I wish that,
Would you want to see the Crockett family be inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame?
I'd like to see my father. He and Vince Sr. were good friends. The family, no. I think my father, just like Vince Sr., they did a lot for wrestling, business.
Any favorite road stories you want to share? Any favorite ribs?
John Valentine. If you go at WRL TV, if we had these buffets, and sometimes you had this Salisbury steak and this gravy, and if he went through the line before you, you did not go in, because he would, I hate to say this, shit in a cup, and then somehow he would get it and cover it with gravy, and
any of the boys fell for it?
Oh,
Yeah,
yes,
fall for it.
yes.
Oh.
Golly, the oil of mustard in their tights, before they go out to wrestle, and all of a sudden, their testicles and rear ends are totally on fire. Then Gene Anderson, he had this ability to, with just two little fingers, pinch, and he would be selling like he's dying, but the baby face is screaming because he is just, it's like a vice grip on him.
Favorite night in the business?
Favorite night? I want to say the dual telecast from Greensboro and Atlanta, even though I didn't particularly care for it, directing that, because I really felt I was in charge in doing it. I'd say, Dusty, Jimmy, calm down, everything will be fine. Because they lost audio there for some reason.
Right.
And I said, we're fine. You can't hear us, but we're fine. We will get you back. It's just,
If you weren't in the wrestling business, what do you think you'd be doing?
I hope that I would have taken Tom Dooley's advice and gone to work for NFL Films.
Is there any final words for anyone out there that you want to say to your fans?
Vince, if you watch this, congratulations. You can write the history. I'm glad that a wrestling person was able to do it. Really, instead of a network.
Well, it was an incredible interview. I want to thank you for being here today with
welcome.
us. And I've been waiting 20 years to say this. Well, David, we're out of time, and we got to go.
Oh, I love doing that. I really do.
It was awesome.
I love doing it. I start laughing.
Got to get a T-shirt and start selling it. We got to go. We're out of time.
Yeah.
Thanks again. It was a great interview.
Oh, you're welcome.